just to show you how tenuous our hold on the U.S. economy is under Donald Trump. The stock market rallied on Monday based on a false rumor that Donald Trump was going to put the brakes on his tariffs for 90 days. And that led the stock market to rally about 10 or 15 percentage points, only because they hoped and prayed that the fake news was real. That's where we're at, as Wall Street has decided it hates Donald Trump, and it is actually in shock that Donald Trump is not listening to his Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. The only thing that kept Wall Street in the game and in support of the Trump administration is they believed he made the right pick in picking Scott Bessent for Treasury instead of Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary. But Scott Bessent, who's not in favor of a lot of tariffs, is playing second fiddle to somebody like Howard Lutnick and Peter Navarro, fresh out of jail, about the tariff policy for Donald Trump. And again, based on a false hope that Donald Trump had come to his senses, which he quickly dashed in a social media posting saying it was fake news, sending the market crashing once again. I'm Michael Popak. You're on the MeidasTouch Network and Legal AF. Let me put on my Wall Street hat. As some people know, I worked for a major Wall Street company for about 4 years as the global head of litigation. Have a little bit of sensitivity in my touch, in my feel about Wall Street. When I say Wall Street, when people say Wall Street, what they mean by that are the institutional traders. Those are the ones that are making big trades for major counterparties, institutions, banks, companies, and that type of thing. Brokers who are sitting in the middle between two counterparties and making VIG, making a commission based primarily on the volatility of the buy and the sell. So you got brokers, you got traders, you got sales representatives who are out trying to sell a block of stock or equity or bonds or something like that. You got financial analysts who cover a certain market, making predictions, trying to get data from publicly traded companies in order to make their predictions. You got the big banks like JP Morgan Chase, whose head, Jamie Dimon, just came out with a letter today basically declaring that, and he's very influential on Wall Street, that the Trump tariff policies are going to cause a recession and inflation. Period. Letter to all of his key clients. So when I say Wall Street, that's what I mean. Now, Wall Street watch the fight over this about 4 or 5 months before the election, or just after the election, let's say December and January, there was a knife fight between Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessent to see who was going to be the Treasury Secretary. And Wall Street breathed a sigh of relief when Scott Bessent won because he runs a hedge fund. He's considered to be more conservative. He used to work for George Soros. They figured he would be the brakes on Donald Trump's worst instincts, like fire the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jay Powell. When he didn't do it, we were like, well, that's probably Scott Bessent. But when he does crazy things, like announce 100-country set of tariffs in a Rose Garden 1-hour press conference with some ridiculous chart that's organized neither by alphabet or by impact, and says, hey, everybody, we're going to do tariffs on countries that only have penguins. And everyone's like, what? 23% across the board. And demonstrates he does not have a fundamental understanding of what the word reciprocal means in reciprocal tariffs, because these are not reciprocal. In any event, we thought, well, okay, he'll announce them in advance and then negotiate. In other words, negotiate in the shadow of the tariff announcement. Nope, he imposed the tariffs. And who's pushing him to do that? There's 3 main components that are pushing him to do this. Stephen Miller, not an economist. In fact, nobody in his National Economic Councils of Advisors is pushing this. This is Stephen Miller, who's the White House Deputy Chief of Staff. It is Peter Navarro, not an economist, who just got out of jail right before the election for lying to Congress and not complying with a subpoena, who's the trade representative. And it's Howard Lutnick. Howard Lutnick has a mixed bag reputation on Wall Street. Let's just call it for what it is. He likes to think of himself as some sort of titan. The reality is it's a middling firm, not anywhere near the top of the major investment banks on Wall Street. It's basically family owned and operated. It's like a mom and pop business. It's a family owned. Yeah, they control some public companies, but this is run by Lutnick and the Lutnick family. Okay. That's why the stock prices of anything related to Howard Lutnick always had a drag on it, because he has no succession plan. Apparently the succession plan was to wait till his 28 and 30-year-old sons were old enough to take over for him while he's serving time wrecking our economy in the government. So he's apparently some sort of very pro-tariff guy. Again, not an economist, never ran the Federal Reserve, never was a Treasury Secretary, and yet he's the one that made the big board. And that's a problem. And so you have this middling real estate developer in Donald Trump and this middling Wall Street guy and Howard Lutnick wrecking the American economy and causing the dumbest recession in the history of America. There's no other way to put it. Wall Street had hoped that Scott Bessent would be the adult in the room. Stop. In fact, his phone reportedly blew up just before and just after Liberation Day by his colleagues and cronies on Wall Street. Like, what the F? What the legal AF is going on? What are you doing? And it just shows you how they're rubbing their eyes on Wall Street. They can't even believe it's happening. So when they heard the false rumor, maybe started by the Trump administration, who really knows, it set the market gyrating. The market today on Monday was heading for another major crash, down 25% from its high. Down, 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 everything down. All of a sudden, the fake rumor comes up, and desperate for hope, desperate for a life preserver, the brokers and traders grabbed onto it and shot the market up. That's the only reason it went up at the end. And it ended up sort of flat on the Dow Jones, up 0.5 or 1, and the Standard & Poor ended up a couple of points, only because of the fake rumor. Now, what did Donald Trump do? Did he embrace it? Did he get the message from Wall Street that they hate his policies? Right? No. He sends out a social media post and calls it fake news. Whoop, we're back again. Wait till you see the futures trading later tonight going into tomorrow. The world economy didn't get the message of the fake tweet. And so it's a bloodbath around the world, which will ultimately back up on us. When the Hong Kong stock market today alone dropped 13%. 13%, its worst performance in 20 years. That's a bad sign, right? 5%, 8%, 10% across the European countries and Asia. Because those companies, those publicly traded companies, need the cash from their stock value in order to make investments, in order to do manufacturing, in order to expand business, in order to increase inventories, in order to buy things. And if we kill that and their confidence to go with it, because let's be frank, stock market is a fickle place. It's based on psychological emotion more than it is underpinnings of economics. But Donald Trump loved it when the stock market outpaced, internal earnings reports for a company. It was a sign of the Trump economy. Well, then this is a sign of the Trump economy. It's in the trash. So bad that Jamie Dimon, who should have been the Treasury Secretary, but wouldn't want to touch the Trump administration with a 10-foot pole, had a level with his best customers in a letter and tell them, yeah, we're going into a recession and inflation because of Trump. I mean, you could sugarcoat it all you want, but that's the case. And now I see why Jamie Dimon didn't take that job, because he didn't want to be stuck like Scott Bessent with egg all over his face, because he would have pushed for no tariffs. He's a globalist. He's a free trader, and he would have lost against Howard Lutnick of all things. And we're off and running. By contrast, remember Joe Biden? Remember the Biden-Harris administration? Yeah. Our Treasury Secretary then was the former head of the Fed, Janet Yellen, an economist, knew what she was doing. Biden listened to his council of economic advisors. You don't even hear their names. The only ones you hear are the ones that are making the real decisions. Stephen Miller, Trump. You don't even hear J.D. Vance. Where is the vice president? You know how much time and energy and emotional currency was spent by MAGA to go after Kamala Harris? Where is she? She's not on the border. What is she doing? What is J.D. Vance doing? He's obviously has no influence and no sway over Donald Trump whatsoever. Okay? Right now, it's the Howard Lutnick, Stephen Miller, Donald Trump show. And we're all just victims. That's all we can say about it. So Wall Street is rubbing its eyes. It can't believe that he put Scott Bessent in Treasury and nobody's listening to him on tariff policy. And even when he had that moment where he could put he knows that Wall Street will rally if he just says he's going to put the tariffs on ice. Instead, he doubles down on it. Donald Trump going up the steps of Air Force One. It's medicine. Well, we need to take our medicine in order to solve the problem. What was the problem? A roaring economy? Shining example of a proper economic growth worldwide? What was the disease that he was trying to solve? The fact that we had economic security under Joe Biden? The fact that I had security in my 401k under Joe Biden? The fact that I felt confident in being a consumer under Joe Biden? That has to be destroyed? In order for what? We're back to Donald Trump as the arsonist fireman. He's the ultimate arsonist fireman, except he doesn't have time to be the fireman. Arsonist fireman causes the problem and then comes to the rescue. They start the fire and then they go out and put it out. But Donald Trump's not going to have time to put it out, and we're the victims of the arson. Like the number one rationale, I'll leave it on this, number one rationale for Donald Trump to raise tariffs is he's going to bring manufacturing jobs home. That is a 5 to 10 year proposition. If he thinks overnight he's going to snap his fingers with tariffs and we're going to start building things again in America, huge numbers, we already build a lot in America. Agricultural products, manufacturing products, technology. We're the number one exporter around the world. Why would you want to shut off all of our markets in order for our U.S. companies to do well unless you're criminally insane? So you're never going to accomplish the thing you can point to the American voter on at midterms. Look what I did. Jobs came back. They're not coming back by the midterms in less than 2 years. You imbecile. I'm Michael Popak. I'm covering it here. Sometimes I wear the Wall Street hat at the intersection of law, politics, and the economy on the MeidasTouch Network.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.